The blade and the battle, the sky over the frontier world of Vora 7 was always red. Dust storms moved across the horizon like waves in an angry sea. In the middle of this dry and distant planet stood a quiet tribal village made of stone, cloth, and strong will. For hundreds of years, the native clans of Vora 7 had protected their traditions and sacred ways. Even after humans arrived from space and settled near their lands, the tribe remained strong and proud. Mark was one of the human soldiers posted at a nearby outpost. He was young but smart. His job was to keep peace between humans and the tribes. He was not like other soldiers who laughed at tribal customs or saw them as old nonsense. Mark listened. He watched. And though he did not understand all the rules, he respected them. One day, a message came from the village. Raiders had been seen nearby. They were not tribal or human soldiers, but outsiders, lawless men with no loyalty to anyone. Mark grabbed his weapon and ran toward the village on foot. His orders were to stay out of tribal matters unless asked. But this time, no one else was coming. And if the raiders attacked the village, many innocent people would die. When Mark arrived, the village was already in chaos. Smoke rose from a burning hut. Villagers ran to safety. Screams filled the air. Among the confusion, he saw a group of raiders dragging a tribal woman across the dirt. She kicked and fought, but they were stronger. Her voice was loud, her eyes full of fire. She shouted words in the tribal language that Mark could not fully understand, but he knew she was calling for help. Mark rushed forward, but before he could reach her, one of the raiders turned and fired. The shot missed, but Mark had no cover. He ducked behind a stone wall and looked around. His rifle had only a few shots left. He needed something better. Then he saw in the center of the village stood a stone circle. Inside it, placed upright in a carved stand, was a blade. It was not like any sword Mark had ever seen. The metal was black with strange red lines running through it like living veins. Its shape was curved and sharp, with symbols carved into its hilt. Mark remembered hearing stories about it from an elder during his last visit. The blade was the pride of the clan, passed down for generations. It was never touched by outsiders, never drawn except in defense of life and honor. He hesitated. He knew this could be seen as a deep insult. But the woman was screaming, and the raiders were closing in. He had no time to think. Mark stepped into the circle, grabbed the blade, and pulled. The sword felt warm in his hands. Light flickered across its surface. For a moment, it was as if the air around him paused. The wind slowed. The noise faded. Even the dust stopped moving. Then everything rushed back at once. Mark ran forward. The blade moved like it knew where to strike. His arms followed its pull. In moments, he cut down the first raider, then the second. The others turned in shock. They had not expected a fighter. They were not ready for someone who fought not with fear, but with purpose. The woman broke free and grabbed a long stick to defend herself. She fought alongside Mark. They stood back to back, blade and stick, human and tribal. The last few raiders saw they were outmatched and ran. Mark let them go. The fight was over. Silence returned to the village. People came out of hiding. Eyes stared at the man holding the sacred blade. Children hid behind their mothers. Elders stood frozen. The woman he had saved looked at him with wide eyes. Mark let the blade drop to the ground, suddenly feeling its weight. He turned to the woman. "Are you all right?" She nodded slowly but said nothing. Her eyes were not angry, not scared, just full of something he could not read. Then an old man stepped forward. His robe was torn, his hands shaking. He spoke in a heavy voice. Mark could only understand part of it, but he caught the words. Blade. Chosen, bond. More elders came. They whispered. They pointed. Mark stood still. He wanted to explain, but he didn't know what he had done wrong. He had only wanted to save her. That was all that the woman walked to the blade and picked it up with care. She did not touch Mark. She did not smile. But she stood beside him, as if accepting something neither of them had asked for. Mark looked at the sky. It was still red. The storm had not passed, but something had changed. He just did not know what, not yet. The Det and the Lawmark sat inside a round hut made of stone and thick fabric. The floor was covered with dried leaves that made a soft sound whenever someone stepped on them. A small fire burned in the center, sending smoke through a hole in the roof. His arm ached from the fight. A cloth was wrapped around his shoulder, stained with blood and dust. The wound was shallow but painful. Across from him sat Lyra, the woman he had saved. She was silent, her hands folded in her lap. Her dark hair was braided in a way that looked ceremonial. Her eyes, sharp and quiet, never left his face. Mark had tried to speak earlier, but she had raised her hand and said nothing. Her expression was unreadable. An elder entered the hut. He was the same man who had spoken after the battle. His name was Olan. His face was lined with years, and his voice was deep, slow, and heavy with meaning. Mark stood up in respect. He did not know what to expect. He had not been arrested or thrown out of the village, but something felt wrong. The people had looked at him differently, some with awe, some with fear. No one had smiled. Olan sat beside the fire and spoke to Lyra first. Their words were in the tribal language, calm but serious. Then Olan turned to Mark and switched to broken human speech. "You take blade," Olan said, pointing with his hand. "You fight. You protect. You act with heart. But you know what blade mean." Mark nodded. "I did what I had to do. I didn't mean to break your law. I just wanted to help." Olan leaned closer. "Blade is more than metal. Blade is spirit. Blade is bond. Only one who is blood may touch. Or one who becomes blood." Mark's brow tightened. "Becomes blood?" Olan looked at Lyra, then back at Mark. "You take up Clan's blade for her. Now you are joined. It is law. You take her burden. You take her path." Mark looked at Lyra, confused. She said nothing. She only stared at the fire. Olan stood. "By sacred rule, you must join. Marriage bond, spirit bond, not forced. But if broken, dishonor comes, not just to her, to all." Mark sat down again. His hands rested on his knees. The words ran through his mind. Marriage, bond, honor, dishonor. He had not come here for this. He had not planned for this. He was a soldier, not a husband. He looked at Lyra again. "Is this true?" She finally spoke. Her voice was steady. "Yes, you touched the blade. In the old way, in front of the tribe. In defense of a clan daughter. You did what only a life partner may do." Mark's mouth was dry. "But I didn't know. I didn't mean to bind us." Her voice grew quiet. "Intent does not matter, action does." He stood and walked in a circle around the hut. His thoughts were a mess. Part of him wanted to leave. Go back to base. Forget it all. But another part held him still. He thought of the fight, the sword, the way it moved in his hands. The way Lyra had stood beside him. He faced Olan. "What happens if I refuse?" Olan's eyes darkened. "Then tribe loses face. Elders lose honor. Other clans may speak against us. Peace may fall. The bond is more than love. It is balance." Mark looked at Lyra again. "And what do you want?" She looked up at him. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I want choice, but I also want peace. For my people, for my clan, for the children who watched you fight for me." He sat back down, his heart heavy. He had come to save a life. He had not known it would cost him his own freedom. Yet now, with everything in front of him, he saw it was not a trap. It was a call, a request, an open door. He nodded slowly. "I need time. I need to think." Olan gave a slow nod. "You have 2 sons. Then the right must begin." or be broken. The elder left the hut, leaving only Mark and Lyra. Silence sat between. Then she finally spoke again. Do you regret it? Mark answered after a long breath. No, I don't regret saving you. She stood and walked to the entrance. Then maybe there is hope. Mark watched her step outside into the red light of the setting sun. Hope. That word stayed with him as the fire crackled and the wind howled outside. The bond and the choice. Mark walked alone through the village as the first sun rose. The light spread across the red sands like fire moving over dry cloth. People were waking. Fires were being lit. Smoke rose gently into the sky. No one stopped him, but many watched him. Some bowed their heads, some turned away. The air felt heavier then. Before, he reached the edge of the village and stood beside a tall rock. From there, he could see the human outpost far in the distance. A gray wall with towers and lights. It felt like another world, a place full of orders, numbers, machines, and rules. But here, in the village, everything moved with rhythm and belief. Two very different worlds. He stood in the middle, pulled. By both. Behind him, he heard footsteps. Lyra had followed him. She wore simple tribal clothes, her hair tied behind her head. Her eyes were calm but serious. She stood beside him in silence for a moment. Then she spoke. You think of going back? Mark nodded without looking at her. Part of me does. I never thought I'd be caught between two lives. Lyra looked toward the outpost. Do they know what happened? No, not yet, but they will. Command watches everything. They will ask questions when I don't report. She picked up a small stone and tossed it down the hill. What will you say? I don't know. Maybe I'll tell them the truth. Maybe I'll say I lost contact. Maybe I'll say I made a choice. She turned to him. But have you? He looked at her for the first time. I'm still trying. Lyra crossed her arms and looked out over the land. When I was a child, my father told me a story. A story of a traveler who found a dying tree in the desert. The traveler gave it water every day. People laughed at him, said the tree was useless, but he kept coming. One day the tree bloomed and gave fruit. The people came and asked for food. The traveler gave it freely, and the people never laughed again. Mark listened without speaking. Lyra continued. He did not plan to save the tree. He simply saw something dying and helped. That help became a bond. That bond became something bigger. That is how my people see the world. Mark let her words settle. He felt the weight of them. He understood what she was saying. What he had done had meaning here. Not just action, but intention behind it. Even if he had not known the law, his heart had made a promise. They stood together until the second sun rose. Its softer light spread over the rocks and sands. The village came fully alive. Drums began to beat in the center. People gathered near. The fire circle. Lyra turned to him again. The elders want to speak. They will ask your answer. Mark breathed in deep. Then let's not keep them waiting. They walked side by side into the village center. A wide circle had been cleared. Elders sat in a ring. Children watched from behind their parents. Warriors stood in silence, hands on spears. The air buzzed with energy. Olan stood and raised his hand. 2 suns have passed. The time has come. Let the choice be spoken. Mark stepped forward. He looked around the circle. He saw faces full of hope and fear. He saw Lyra's face calm but unreadable. He spoke slowly. I came here to protect peace. I never planned for this. I didn't know your laws. I didn't know the bond. But I have learned. I have seen your way. I have seen your strength. He paused and looked at Lyra again. I do not know what the future brings, but I know I do not want to walk away. Not from this place. Not from this bond. The elders nodded. Olan spoke again. Then let the joining begin. The people moved in rhythm. Drums beat louder. Two young women brought out a long cloth dyed in red and black. It was placed between Mark and Lyra. Each of them stepped onto one end of the cloth. The cloth represented the path between them, separate yet joined. Olan handed Mark the clan blade. It had been cleaned and wrapped in silk. Mark held it with respect. He offered it to Lyra with both hands. She accepted it, placed it between them, then touched her forehead to the hilt. Mark followed her movement. The people clapped once, loud and clear. Olan raised his arms. The bond is made. Not by blood, not by force, but by choice. Lyra turned to face Mark. From this moment, your path is mine. My people are your people. We share burden and joy. Mark nodded. And I stand by your side, in light and shadow. With sword and spirit. The ceremony ended as the village sang a slow chant. It was not loud, but it filled the air with warmth. That evening, a small fire was lit just for Mark and Lyra. They sat together under the stars, away from the others. No guards. No watchers. Just the two of them. Mark looked up at the sky. Do you believe this bond will last? Lyra smiled softly. I believe we are both strong. That is enough. Mark looked at her and smiled back. In that moment, something shifted inside him. Not duty, not law, but something real. Something steady. He had made his choice. And it felt right. The threat returns night on Vora 7 was never silent. The wind moved through the canyons with a deep voice. Small animals made strange sounds in the dark. Fires burned low in the village as most people rested in their homes. Only the guards stayed awake, watching the shadows. Mark sat near the edge of the village, sharpening a blade. Not the clan sword, but a smaller one given to him by one of the warriors. His hands moved with focus, but his eyes watched the stars. The sky here looked different from Earth. The stars were brighter, closer, and seemed to speak secrets only the brave could hear. Lyra joined him without a word. She sat down and placed her spear beside her. Her presence brought a calm strength that Mark had grown used to. He did not have to speak when she was near. Silence between them was never empty. After a while, Lyra spoke. Scouts saw movement. Beyond the southern hills, Mark turned to her. Raiders? She nodded once. The same ones. The ones you fought when you saved me. They are coming again, with more men, more weapons. He stood and looked toward the south. The wind carried a dry scent, dust and fire. Trouble was coming. We have maybe one day, Lyra continued. Maybe less. Mark clenched his jaw. We need to prepare. Before sunrise, the village was awake. The elders gave orders. Warriors gathered. Traps were placed near the narrow paths leading into the village. Hidden spots were set for archers. Children and elders were sent to a cave nearby, guarded by two trusted fighters. The mood was serious, but not fearful. These people had lived through many storms. Mark walked through the center of the village with Lyra by his side. Both wore simple armor made from local hides and metal pieces traded long ago. On Mark's back rested the clan blade, now his by choice. Its weight no longer felt strange. It felt like part of him. He met with the human commander through a long range. Call. The officer offered to send backup, but it would take time. Mark refused. He did not want outsiders to interfere. Not unless the tribe asked. This was their land, their fight, and now his too. Lyra gathered the younger fighters and taught them how to use the land as a weapon. Mark helped place energy mines in key areas, hidden beneath the sand. Together, they formed a plan not just to defend, but to win. As the sun began to set, the air turned sharp. The ground trembled slightly. Then came the first sound. A scream. In the wind. A signal. The raiders arrived on fast bikes and rough transports. They wore mismatched armor and carried stolen weapons. Their leader stood tall above the rest, holding a banner taken from a fallen tribe. His face was painted in red lines, and his voice echoed like thunder. Give us the blade. Give us the warrior who took it, or we take everything." The village stood firm. No answer came. Only silence. Then Mark stepped forward, blade in hand. The wind blew his hair back. His eyes were steady. "I am the one you seek," he called. "But you will not take anything. Not today." The leader laughed and gave the signal. The raiders charged. Battle began with fire and dust. Arrows flew from rooftops. Explosives buried in the sand blasted the first wave of attackers. Screams followed. Warriors jumped from the walls with spears and blades. Mark moved through the chaos like a storm. The clan sword glowed faintly as if remembering its purpose. Every strike he made was clean, every movement sharp. Lyra fought beside him, her spear dancing in the air. They did not speak. They did not need to. The raiders fought hard. They used drones, fireballs, and shock sticks, but the tribe had heart, and the land itself helped them. Narrow paths slowed the enemy. Smoke from hidden fires confused their vision. The village fought like one body. Mark reached the leader near the old water well. The raider swung a heavy axe, powered by a plasma core. Mark blocked it with the clan blade. The impact shook his arms, but he stood his ground. "You do not belong here," the raider growled. Mark pushed him back. "I do now." They clashed. Again, sparks flew. Dust rose. The sounds of battle surrounded them. Lyra joined the fight, jabbing her spear at the raider's side. He turned to block her, and Mark struck. The blade cut deep. The leader dropped his axe and fell to the ground. His men saw this and began to run. The village chased them to the hills, then stopped. The fight was over. Smoke curled into the sky as the villagers gathered once more. Bodies were carried with care. Wounds were treated. Fires were rebuilt. Mark stood in the center, covered in sweat and dust. The blade hung at his side. Lyra stood next to him, her face calm but proud. Olan stepped forward. "You have not just fought. You have stood as one of us. You are no longer outsider. You are family." Mark looked around at the faces. He saw trust. He saw respect. He saw something real. Lyra spoke softly. "You gave us more than strength. You gave us hope." Mark looked at her, and a quiet smile formed. The bond they had was no longer a law. It was something they had earned. He had taken the blade to save her once. Now he had fought with her to protect them all. And this time, he understood what it meant. The union and the peace. The sun rose slowly over the hills of Vora 7, casting a warm orange light across the sands. Smoke from the battle still drifted into the sky, but the air felt different now. The sound of war had faded. The people of the tribe moved quietly, picking up pieces of broken weapons, treating wounds, and rebuilding what had been damaged. Though tired, their steps were firm, and their spirits calm. Mark sat near the center of the village, sharpening the edge of the clan blade. His hands moved with care and patience. Across from him, young warriors watched him closely, their eyes full of questions. He looked up and gave a short nod. Without words, they knew what it meant. Keep learning. Keep protecting. Stay strong. Lyra stood near the sacred well, speaking with the elders. Her voice carried wisdom and confidence. Her face no longer held doubt. She spoke not just as a warrior, but as a leader. Her bond with Mark had grown into something deeper. The tribe saw it. They respected it. Olan called for a gathering. The people formed a wide circle in the heart of the village. Fires were lit. Drums were played in a slow rhythm. Children sat on their parents' laps. Warriors stood behind the elders. Everyone was waiting for what would come next. Mark stood beside Lyra, both dressed in cloth woven with red and black thread, colors of unity and balance. Around their necks hung pendants carved from the same stone. These were not symbols of power, but signs of commitment. A bond made by action, not words. Olan raised his hand to speak. His voice was firm and clear, reaching every ear. A time of trial has passed. A time of change is here. The blade was lifted in defense, but the heart behind it gave it meaning. Today we mark the true joining of paths, not because of law, not because of war, but because two spirits chose to walk together. He turned toward Mark and Lyra. You faced the fire and did not run. You shared blood, breath, and burden. Do you now share the path ahead? Lyra stepped forward. Her voice was steady. I do, not because I must, but because I trust. I believe in the bond we have formed, in the strength we bring together, in the peace we can hold. Mark followed. His words came slow, each one full of meaning. I do. Because I see her not as part of another world, but as part of mine. I came here to keep peace. I found something greater. I found a reason to stay. The drums stopped. The village grew quiet. Olan held out the clan blade between them. Both placed their hands on it. For a moment, the blade shimmered with a soft red glow. Then silence returned. Olan smiled and lowered his hand. The bond is complete. Two paths become one. The villagers clapped once, then again. The sound spread in waves. It was not loud, but it carried a power that could be felt deep inside. Later, that night, food was shared around the fires. Stories were told, laughter returned to the air, children danced. Songs rose into the stars. The village breathed again, not in fear, but in celebration. Mark sat with Lyra beneath the sky. She leaned against his shoulder. He looked up, the stars shining brighter than ever. He thought of his old life, of Earth, of orders and reports. It all felt far away. What he had now was real, built through trial, shaped by choice. Lyra spoke. In a soft voice, the clan believes in signs. They say the blade never wakes for the wrong hand. Mark nodded, thinking of the moment he had first grabbed the sword. I think the blade chose both of us, he replied. Not just to fight, but to build something stronger. She looked at him, her eyes warm and full of light. Then let us protect it, together. Time passed. The village healed. The bond between humans and tribes grew stronger. The outpost commander visited, bringing gifts and respect. No orders were given, only support. The story of Mark and Lyra spread beyond the desert. Other clans began to speak of a future without walls, without fear. Mark remained in the village. Not as a guest, not as a soldier, but as one of them. He trained young fighters. He listened to the elders. He helped rebuild the walls, plant crops, and carry water. His hands were always busy, his heart always full. Lyra stood by his side, leading with grace and strength. Together, they were more than bonded. They were symbols of what could happen when trust replaced fear, when action replaced words, and when people chose unity over pride. Years later, the clan blade was placed in the sacred circle once more, not to be drawn in battle, but to remind all who looked upon it of the day a man picked it up to protect, and in doing so, became more than a hero. He became part of a new beginning. The end.